and welcome. I'm your host, Cherie Best. You are listening to Just Love Them. Today, we're talking about validation. What is validation exactly? Validation is that feeling that confirms that you are valuable, worthwhile, and understood. Let me give you an example. A few days ago, I was driving up the road near our house. This road starts out with 2 lanes, but at one point, the right lane becomes a turning lane and ends, while the left lane continues. Before you get to that ending point, there is a yellow road sign with a black arrow showing the lane turning right, followed shortly by a white sign with the words, "Right lane ends." I am driving in the left lane because I am going straight. I notice that in the right lane, right beside me, is a white car. It's going the same speed I am. As I'm driving in my lane, I notice that the white car suddenly speeds up a little as we're getting close to where the right lane ends. The front of the white car is now slightly ahead of the front of my car. Then the car starts moving nearer and nearer across the dotted line and into my lane. My brain screams, "They're going to hit us." In a split second, I realize that if I stay in my lane, that white car is going to collide into the side of my car and cause an accident. In the next split second, I choose not to veer left to avoid the collision because that would put me into oncoming traffic. Almost without thinking, I do the only thing I can. I slam on my brakes. The white car pulls fully into my lane ahead of me and keeps going. I hit my horn and let it blare long and loud. The white car seems not to notice. I glance in my rearview mirror. There's no one close, which is good because if there had been, they definitely would have rear-ended me. I take a shaky deep breath and accelerate. I feel rattled. My hands are shaking. I continue up the road, but my legs feel like spaghetti and I am angry. What was that guy thinking anyway? He didn't even seem to notice or care that he almost ran me off the road and caused an accident. When I get home, my husband is standing in the kitchen. "You'll never believe what just happened," I fume. I tell him the whole story. He listens. I'm still shaking. When I'm done, he says, "That would rattle anybody," and he takes me in his arms and gives me a hug. "I'm glad you're okay." I instantly feel validated, comforted, and understood. Now, what if he would have said, "Okay, whatever"? Or what if he would have said, "You almost got in an accident? You should be more careful." Or what if he would have said, "Well, he's driving faster. You should get out of his way. He doesn't want to get behind someone slower." Or what if he just changed the subject and said, "So, what's for dinner?" Any of these responses would have left me feeling unheard, unvalidated, and either frustrated or angry. The only response that helps is validation. In this case, that would rattle anybody. "I'm glad you're okay." Validation is being understood, and humans have a strong desire, even a need, to be understood. It's part of who we are. I'd like to review the 4 types of invalidating responses that I just mentioned, which my husband could have used. This is by no means an all-inclusive list. First, there's the shrug. This says they either aren't listening or they don't care. It's okay, whatever. Then there's the arguer, which puts you on the defensive. "You almost got in an accident? You should be more careful." This creates an argument, or at least a feeling of defensiveness in the other person. Then there's the opposer. This is the person who takes the other person's side. "Well, he's driving faster. You should get out of his way. He doesn't want to get behind someone slower." And then there's the avoider. This is the one who doesn't want to talk about it, and they just change the subject. "So, what's for dinner?" The listener. as demonstrated so adequately by my husband, is the only one that validates, that meets that need to be understood. Which one are you? Are you the shrugger, the arguer, the opposer, the avoider, or the listener? We all need validation. And since this podcast is about working through feelings about other people's choices, let's put it in that context. In these often tricky conversations that happen when someone has a different religious view, opinion, or behavior than yours, this one tool, this validating, can make all the difference between someone feeling safe, listened to, and loved, and feeling frustrated, angry, and distant. It makes the difference between a bonding and healing conversation and a conversation that drives a wedge and creates distance in a relationship. Here are some possible responses when being a listener. You might say something like, "I can see why you'd feel that way. That would be scary. I understand," or "I can empathize. That sounds hard." Validating creates empathy. When you're going through something traumatic, like almost getting in a car accident, or having people you care about deeply leave their religion, there are lots of feelings that need to be validated in order to keep or build a good relationship. Your feelings and theirs. When you validate someone else's feelings by first listening and then responding appropriately, you help heal, nurture, and grow the relationship. The very first step before having a validating conversation is to be in an emotional place to do so. If you are in a very vulnerable place and not yet in a place to listen to the other person without showing negative or strong emotion, I suggest waiting and working through your emotions first. It will do you no good to ask to listen to the other person if you're just going to cry the whole time to what they are saying, or if you're going to sit there looking mad. They will know you're not safe. They will know you're not ready. Your words and your actions, or your body language, all need to match. And how do you get in a place to be ready for that conversation? Well, that's a topic for another podcast episode. I could do hours on this topic alone, and maybe I will in some upcoming episodes. So let's say that you are in a place to listen. You may want to let the other person know that you're ready and willing to have a conversation with them by saying something like, "I'd like to understand what you're going through," or "Do you want to share with me how you feel?" or "I'd like to listen if you want to talk about it." This opens up space and lets them know that you care about how they feel and that you want to understand them. It tells them that you are a safe person to share with, so make sure that you are. Don't feel bad if you get a no from them. All this says is that they are not yet ready. Continue to show them that you love and accept them, and give them space to talk when they are ready. When the other person does start sharing with you, be alert and attentive. Give them eye contact and genuine interest. Do not negatively react to what they are saying, not even with facial expressions, or you will shut them down. A great way to show that you are listening, that you really do want to understand, is to use some magic words. Tell me more. These magic words tell the other person that you are with them. You are listening. You are putting yourself in their shoes, and you want to understand everything that they are thinking and feeling. Tell me more. You likely have also heard of reflective listening. This is when you say back to the person what you think they are saying. For example, if the person says, "I feel uncomfortable in class," you could reflectively listen by saying, "So you're saying that you don't like going to class because of how you feel, is that right?" At which time they will likely say, "Yeah," and then they will go on to elaborate. Or they will say, no, that's not it, at which time they will go on to elaborate. Either way, they are giving you a chance to understand how they feel. So listen and seek to understand. No judgment, no instructing, no fixing, just listening to understand. Nothing feels better than being understood. I have a friend whose son recently left the faith she raised him in. One day he came over to visit. She noticed he had a new tattoo on his arm. Growing up, she had taught him to honor his body, in part by not tattooing it. She could have been a shrugger, looked at the tattoo, rolled her eyes, and said, whatever. Or she could have been argumentative and put him on the defensive with something like, I see you went ahead and got a tattoo regardless of what we taught you. Or she could have been an opposer. I guess what God wants doesn't matter to you at all, does it? Or she could have been an avoider and said nothing to his obviously exposed arm, ignoring the elephant in the room. Sometimes avoiders don't know what to say and don't want to come across as judging and critical, so they say nothing. And while it is better to say nothing than to be judgmental or critical, silence is often perceived that way anyway. Instead, she was a listener. She said, I see you got a tattoo. Tell me about it. Which he did. When he was done, she simply said with a smile, thanks for sharing that with me, and gave him a hug. Beautiful. Sometimes opening a validating conversation is all that is needed to get the elephant out of the room. This does not mean you need to agree with them. Understanding someone else does not mean you change your values or your opinion. It simply means that you can put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from. It's all about validating. Everyone wants to feel listened to. Everyone wants to feel cared about. Let's review. First, we're going to listen to understand. Say those magic words. Tell me more. While you're listening, really listen. Don't be formulating your response. Immerse yourself in what they are saying. Listen from a place of love. Listen to understand. Second, when it is your turn to talk, don't jump in and share your thoughts. A first great response is to clarify or say back to them what you thought they were saying. You would be surprised how many times what we hear is not what the other person is trying to say. So say it back to them. For example, it sounds like you, or what I hear you saying is, or if I understand correctly, you feel. At this point, they will either affirm that you got it right, or they'll say something like, no, what I'm saying is, at which time you get to listen more and reflect back again until you get it right. At this point, the other person has the chance to feel understood and validated because you have really listened and listened to understand. I'd love to share with you one more piece. Once the other person is feeling validated, it can be very healing to say something like, I'm so glad to know how you feel, or thank you for sharing that with me. I really care about you and how you feel. Or I understand better where you're coming from now. Thanks for taking time to explain it to me. By doing it this way, you are in no way agreeing or buying in with their opinions or their beliefs. You simply care about the other person and you want to understand them. You want them to feel safe sharing. If your goal was to understand the other person, this is a great place to end the conversation. If you have feelings that you also want to share, you may consider saying something like, could I share with you how I feel about it? Or would you be open to knowing my thoughts? Or would you be willing to have a conversation with me about whatever it is? In episode 9 of this podcast, our relationship specialist, Emil Harker, talks about this part of the conversation. If you're wanting more insight into this, go back and listen to Emil Harker's interview on episode 9. Keep in mind that there is no guarantee that they are going to validate your feelings. Remember that you have now had training on how to validate feelings. They have not, and they may not even be aware of the need to validate your side at all. There's a possibility that when you ask if you can share your thoughts, they might say no. If they do, leave it at that. They may not be in a place or have the awareness to reflect validation back to you. In that case, find someone else who is safe to share your feelings with. Don't let your feelings build up inside. Find a safe place and share them. And don't expect yourself to be able to do this perfectly right out of the gate. Just like any other skill, it takes practice. And even with how much I have taught this and practiced this, sometimes I still mess up. Just the other day, my husband was sharing something with me, and I was not being a good listener. At one point, I had to apologize and ask if we could start the conversation over so I could have a chance to be a better listener. You can do this. Your relationships are worth it. Try these listening skills. Practice them again and again. You will get better and better, and so will your relationships. They are worth it. So are you. If you would like a list of examples of things to say when having these conversations, like the ones that I used here today, contact me at CherieBest.com and fill out the contact form at the bottom of the homepage. It's going to ask you for your name, an email address, and a subject. There's also a place to leave a message. You can just put the word conversations in the subject line, or leave me a little note saying you'd like a copy of the conversations. I'd be glad to email them to you. I will also put this information in the show notes so you can find them there. If you liked this episode, please take a minute to give me a great review. This helps other people searching to find my podcast. And please join me again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.